And good day, everyone. I'm glad to welcome you to another live Xanadu Gallery online critique group session. Today is Wednesday, April 6th, 2022. It is great to be back here with you on a Wednesday to share each other's art. And I'd like to jump right in and welcome our guest today, Rick Bogatz, who's joining us from Toronto in Ontario. Rick, good day. How are you?
Great. How are you guys doing?
Doing very
Really
well.
glad to be here. Yeah.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And Rick, if we can, to get started, give us a little bit of your background, how you came to be interested in photography. You've had a career that was adjacent to that. Talk to us
Yeah.
a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So I spent about 40 years in media, both in print as a reporter and a copy editor. And that started in around 1981. And I worked for newspapers here in Canada. I always had an interest in photography.
And where did that interest come from, Rick? What was
you know,
the
you know,
attraction?
It was funny because my dad was a draftsman by trade, but he painted on the side and he did it as a hobby. And I sketched all the time, and I was very interested in art at that point. And he was really kind of driving my interest. But I was frustrated by painting, and I had never seemed to get to the point where I was satisfied with the work. And I really can't recall how the interest in photography first started. But I remember taking pictures. My first camera that I can recall having was a Canon A1, and I started taking pictures with this. And I thought, wow, the results that I was seeing, it kind of got me over that frustration part that I was experiencing with painting. So I moved into the direction of photography. I did some photography while I was a journalist, while I was reporting and copy editing. But in around 1993, I decided, to take the plunge, and I went back to school to Humber College here in Toronto and studied photography full time for 2 years. They had a 2-year program there, very much focused on the technical side of photography. And I was lucky enough, my employer, who I was working for as a reporter and an editor, brought me back on as a news photographer. So I worked as a news photographer for a while, combining both the photography side and my writing. So those two skills together, I was able to get into a freelancing kind of groove. But then what happened was that a friend of mine told me that this place called America Online was hiring in Canada, and that was in 1997. So I became an editor at AOL when they were starting up here in Toronto, in Canada. And then after that, I was in online media for quite a number of years, working at AOL. I worked for Quebecor Media, CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which is the public broadcaster here up in Canada, and finally Microsoft. So I spent 13 years at Microsoft, and I ran, and people may be familiar with this site, I ran MSN for both in Canada and the US. And then I've just recently retired, but all during that period, I was taking photographs, and I had a bit of luck with shows. And in the mid 90s, they have a festival here in Toronto, a photography festival called Contact, and it's an annual photography festival that's held every May. And I was lucky enough to be able to show at Contact back in the mid 90s. I did 3 years of showing with group shows there. And then it kind of, it dried up a little bit, but now I've gotten back into it more on a fuller time basis. And I've had some luck with shows. I was part of a group show recently with a gallery in Portland, a gallery I'm showing now with a group show in a gallery, the Blank Wall Gallery in Athens. I've had some work published, and I'm just looking at this stage, I guess, really around gallery representation and building out, my portfolio of content. So I've been doing a lot of shooting plus trying to get representation or shows, at least, or group shows.
Well,
So
that
that's
I think is a good transition to take us into your work and to talk a little bit about the work itself and your subject matter. So let me go ahead and pull up the images that you had submitted. And we're going to see primarily landscape imagery, but that's not the only imagery you have followed in your career. So talk to us a little bit about how you came to photography and kind of where your interests lie.
Yeah, so at the beginning, my initial interest in photography was around photojournalism and street photography. So I was doing a lot of that type of work at the early stages of, I guess, my photography career. And like I said, I did a bit of work as a photojournalist and covering news. And I was really, at the beginning, it was all about street photography. But I guess it morphed into, it's funny because I guess, the editorial side of me is all about, editing out what's not, what's unnecessary,
Yeah.
whether it's in writing or in my image or in my photography work, and trying to really get honed down to the basics. But then, a few years ago, I had an opportunity to travel to Marfa, Texas, and see the work of Donald Judd. And I was completely blown away by just the work that he was, that his work down there, and just the landscape in Southwest Texas itself. And I really then began to think about minimalism as a genre and as a characteristic of my work. So trying to strip away as much as I can and look at a lot of negative space. And then that work kind of morphed into more of the landscape work that I'm currently doing. A lot of it has to do with long exposures. I live quite close to Lake Ontario, so I'm out there quite a bit, shooting throughout all the seasons up here in Canada. It can get quite cold, as you can imagine, in the winter, but there's still a lot of opportunities during that season to work on this kind of minimalist, like I said, this minimalist genre, this landscape work that I'm doing. And, I can drive about an hour's north of Toronto in the winter and come across really untouched snow, which I really, really love. The snow here in Toronto can get pretty much trampled on in a couple of hours,
Yeah.
but up north, you get a lot of good, clean snow. And I think that contrast between the man-made objects like the fencing and the first image you showed there, and the contrast between that and the snow is what I find quite pleasing aesthetically.
And what about the decision to work in black and white? What drew you? Again, I mean, obviously, you already mentioned kind of the minimalism and simplicity, and that's got to play a little bit into that decision as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, it's just the photographers that I've been influenced by, and the work that I've admired over the years, like Andre Kertész and Mary Ellen Mark, James Nachtwey for some of the photojournalistic, although he did shoot a lot in color. And then more recently, looking at Michael Kenna's work, and then there's another photographer here up in Canada, Jan Bell, who does very similar type of work. So I think it was just, it just, to me, it's just what I was influenced by, and I kind of stuck to that.
Now, Rick, your career also has spanned a pretty significant transition in photography as it moved from film and the dark room to
Yeah.
digital. Maybe talk a little bit about your experience going through that transition.
Yeah. When I was working as a photojournalist, it was all film. It was really in the very, very, very early stages of digital cameras, where you were carrying like a big backpack, on your shoulder, but it was mostly film. So I always, when I studied photography, it was all film. When I worked as a photojournalist, it was film, and it was interesting. I mean, I always, and when we, all the how, the homes that we've lived in over the years, I've always had a dark room that I built. But I have to say that, on the digital front, all my work now is in digital. I just find it to be, more flexibility. I'm not, with a family as well, you don't, as everybody probably knows, you don't have you don't have as much time. So I find the digital work just helps to kind of create more volume, more content. But, there is still that in the back of my head, there's still that love of film and being in the darkroom as well. So that's kind of where I learned. I was lucky enough when I was working as a photojournalist back in the day. I had a couple of great mentors on staff who would take me through my paces and teach me things that you can't really learn in the classroom. There's a real world situations, but I always kind of, through the photographers that influenced me and who work I admired, was almost always black and white.
And not to dwell too much on digital versus film, but how much I guess I'd be curious to know how much effort is required, or if you even think about kind of trying to replicate wouldn't be the right word, but to kind of try and achieve the same kind of effects from a digital output that you would have achieved through film and in the darkroom, or is it just a completely different approach to editing and managing the imagery?
I think, I, I think philosophically, you're trying to get as close to, like an analog image or a film image as you can. And you're still applying the same principles when it comes to things like burning and dodging. It's the same type of work. It's just the tools that you're using are different, but you're still applying the same principles.
And then let's talk about format. I didn't even get to this last image, but when you're outputting the artwork for display at a show or in a gallery, let me get some presentation images up. What are you looking to achieve in that presentation and the format?
I think, this is a matter of keeping things very simple, keeping, the attention is on the image. I think, the idea is to, through the framing and the matting, is to make things as simple as possible, so the focus is entirely on the image.
So let me go ahead and pull in some of our members here to talk a little bit about reactions to the work. And I'm going to pull a few comments that came in by email. This one from Mary Adams, who's also in Ontario, and says, your subject matter is beautiful. You've captured the feeling of the areas that you've presented. The Windswept Pine reminds me of the Group of Seven's work. Your work seems to fit Jason's advice regarding continuity of subject and style, and thanks for sharing. And then Jeff from Long Island, New York, who is also a photographer, says, regarding presentation, I feel like the simple black frame and the thicker matte, he says, I'm sorry. I think it shows off the image well. I think you might benefit, however, from a more consistent approach for matte border sizes and also using non-glare glass.
Yeah, yeah.
So let me pull then some of you that are here in the group in and get some of your comments, and let me put us back out to the group so we can all see each other. I'd love to get some reactions to the work and to Rick's background. What struck you most about his imagery and work, and what would you say to Rick about his work? Let me go to Susan first.
Well, I am thinking it looks great, but I know so many times women express for having a certain color that they like. So much of that. I bet there's a lot of variety of people that might enjoy these because it's very realistically good and interesting. But knowing some people just always said, "Oh, I have to have a purple or I have to have the
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, right? As you make a selection to go into a black and white, that's a decision, right? That it
right.
is going to allow you to achieve some effects. Also, going to have some consequences. Obviously, not every collector, not every home is going to, you know, find a space for a black and white. And I think it's also kind of interesting. You know, I love photography and photographic work. And so I pay a lot of attention to it. I represent photographers and other digital artists in my gallery. And when I'm visiting galleries, I spend a lot of time lingering in over the artists, the photographic artists. And it's been interesting that you'll kind of see you'll see waves where for a time you know, it seems to be more color photography, and then you'll go into phases where it's more black and white. And I think we're in a phase right now, maybe where there isn't quite as much black and white photography, or it's not as prominent as it was maybe 10, 15 years ago. That's a challenge and an opportunity, right? Because there's still an audience out there who love that simplicity and who will seek it. So my advice is always yes. There might be someone out there who really loves purple, but if I spend my life trying to cater to every taste, then I lose myself in the work. And I think instead, what we want to do is create what you're excited about, and then find the audience that's going to resonate with it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Elizabeth, I think I might have seen that you had a comment.
Well, I love the minimalist sense that you have, and of course, when you go there, composition is such a commanding force, and you do it beautifully. I love how you balance all your values too. Just everything just seems to work to pull me into your photographs to want to linger there a lot longer than what Jason puts them up for.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
and Elizabeth, I'm curious. What's it like? You're a painter. What's it like looking at photographic imagery as a painter? You know, as you think about, you know, as you kind of look at your work and compare it to a photographer's work.
I think what attracts me so much in photographs, and you do this beautifully also, Rick, is the atmosphere. Because as we talked about last week, how difficult creating atmosphere like Turner does, I find that that's so much easier to capture in photographs than in painting. And that's also a part of the reason why I think these are so excellent, because there's an atmosphere that you project in here that gives a feeling to the photograph. I mean, there's an emotional response that goes on here. It's very, very potent.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beverly. Go ahead, Rick.
Sorry. I was just going to say that, you know, as I got more into the long exposures in regards to the landscapes, what I found, you know, and you talk, Elizabeth, about composition, the importance of composition. And I found that when I was doing long exposures, or when I do long exposures, it really does require, you know, it requires the photographer, at least, or myself, to slow down, you know, and I appreciate that aspect of it. Whereas in photojournalism, you know, I found it was very quick. You had to react, but with the long exposures, you're taking a lot more equipment with you for first of all, so you want to make sure you're going to places that you're going to be able to capture an image, but also you think more probably about the composition more deliberately than perhaps when you're just shooting as photojournalistically, I suppose.
Yeah,
At
excellent.
least
Beverly.
that's for me anyway. That's how it comes about. Yeah.
Yeah, Beverly, did you have a comment as well?
Yes, I also love the minimalism, and I think that it's very important that to have the black and white. I think that that's part of the whole thing. And of course, some people will prefer color, but we cannot please everybody. That is just a fact. So if you went into color, it would spoil the stillness of the image. I think that's very important. And I also agree with the person who said about the non-reflective glass. You don't want anything to be detracting from your image. And I know it's a lot more expensive, but it's worth it to just let people really focus on the image.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah,
I
for
would
sure.
say.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so let's talk a little bit, Rick. You've already mentioned that you've had some opportunities to show the work and to have the work in gallery spaces. What has your experience been in terms of responses to the work as you're seeking representation? What are the challenges maybe that you have faced or anticipate facing when it comes to getting your work out there?
Yeah, I think at the beginning, and I've just sort of started to, pardon my pun, but sort of refocus my energies on photography since November, December of last year. And I think at the beginning it was all about, look, I have to kind of build up my resume. The photography side of my resume was fairly thin and was dated. So I thought, well, I started to apply for contests, and first of all, it was contests, and I had a bit of luck. There was some opportunities where I was able to at least, get an honorable mention or, get some recognition from contests. But it does, you have to pay a fee, and, you have to be careful. I found that I had to be careful around budgeting for those types of things. And I didn't want it to be kind of a lost leader when it came to, getting gallery representation. And the opportunities of applying for these types of group shows, I found that there seemed to be more opportunities, at least early on, in places like Europe and the US. But I did, I just kept at it, and Jason, I've taken the advice that you've provided in some of the courses that you've done at just, you can't really look at 4 or 5 galleries and think, well, that's enough. I've applied to those many, and that if they don't like my work, well, too bad. So I've just tried to take a look at the number of galleries that are in Toronto, which is more of a competitive environment, but then starting to kind of expand out to Southern Ontario and then Eastern Ontario, and applying to galleries there. I don't, quite honestly, I hear back from some, but not a lot, so it's just a matter of keep plugging away,
Persistence and
persistence. I was able to apply for a group showing for next month's Contact photo festival in Toronto so I'll be showing 2 pieces at the Elaine Fleck Gallery here in Toronto. They're on downtown Toronto. And one of them will be the windswept pine that you're showing there. So yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of, trying to learn as much as I can, take courses, watch YouTube videos, and when it comes to techniques like long exposure techniques and working with Photoshop and Lightroom and for the post-production work. So it's been a great experience, and I think the persistence will pay off eventually.
Yeah, I would echo that. And I do think you mentioned building resume and participating in contests and events. And I agree that can be, well, it can be a twofold benefit. One is that resume building, although I would say that there is some diminishing return as you build that resume where, after a certain point, a gallery might pay attention to 5 or 6 awards that you've won and shows that you participated in, but 7 or 8 or 10 or 12 might not make that much of a difference after that point. So I always, I say pursue that kind of recognition for its own sake and, to a certain degree, but maybe not, you got to be careful or else you can end up with decades of those kind of pursuits, and we wouldn't necessarily want that. But the other benefit is obviously the exposure that you're getting and the feedback that you start to get, the opportunity to have people seeing the work and responding to it, the opportunity to see the work in a space, designed for showing that work, and that can give you a new vision for what's possible to achieve. And so, I agree. Keep doing that, but keep reaching out to those galleries, and don't be afraid to follow up if you don't hear back from a gallery after a submission.
Yeah, I think it's great advice, and I think it's about having the confidence in your work, and I just find that it's easy to kind of talk yourself out of things sometimes.
Yes,
you go, oh no,
exceedingly easy.
Everybody's better than me, so
yeah.
I'm not gonna show this work, but you have to kind of get over that. And I think, as you say, Jason, at some point a gallery or another organization will like your work and want to take it on. So
yes, and have an audience that's hungry for that imagery. Terry, I think maybe you had a comment, and I didn't get you in quite. Did you want to hop in? Let's see if we've got you there. There we go. Good morning.
Hi. It was way back, so I'm probably out of line now, but
there is no wrong.
Okay. I love the minimalism, and I think sometimes when I'm looking at a photograph to buy or in the gallery. Oh, and I'm sorry, we have device problems here. I'm looking for a place that I can't go to by myself, or that I can't get to, and your minimalist your minimalist landscapes with the snow that's untouched, the winding fences, they take me to a place I can't get to. And those are the images that I tend to hang on to. They let me drift as well. So I love, and the black and white, when we were going back to color, black and white, the black and white really feeds that sense of minimalism for me. So it was just a moment of praise that I tried to give way back.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point. And there's some discussion about this. I remember there was a gallery owner here in Scottsdale, very successful gallery owner, represented some very well-known artists. And he was adamant with his artists. He would say, do not bring me imagery of the backcountry wilderness that human eyes have never seen. Don't, what I want is imagery that was painted or photographed from the roadside stop where the people have been, that they can identify with. And his theory, I think, was that, people want to have a piece of artwork that resonates with them and their own experience. And I thought that was interesting. And certainly I've had many instances in the past where I've sold art to people who have responded, I think I've been to this spot. Or somewhere very much like it. But over the years, I've also seen a real contrast to that, where art does have the ability to transport us to unseen vistas. Last week, as we were talking, about Thomas Moran and some of the other artists who were exploring the West and Canada, that there was an opportunity to have that sense of having our breath taken away by seeing something that we've never seen before. So I wonder, Rick, maybe respond to that. What art, as you think about your subject matter, how much is your viewer in your mind, or is that just completely something that is ancillary to the work that you're doing?
I don't really think too much about, whether, this is going to be an image where, where people may not have seen it, or, that type of thing. I think it's more, it's just kind of when I'm looking at image, and when I'm looking at scenery, or I'm looking at landscapes or places where I've been, I'm just looking for, the aesthetic that might be pleasing, or the composition that might be pleasing for the viewer or myself, and that includes myself as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether I'm kind of thinking, well, this might take people to a different place, or this might be a place where people have never been before. That image of the windswept pine, for example, is at Kildare Provincial Park, north of Toronto. And actually, this is in the brochure of the park. This is called the most photographed pine in Ontario. When you go there, you see a lot of campers because it's so unusual. It's just this very lone, small pine tree that's already been bent over by years and years of wind on that shoreline. And there's a lot of people taking pictures of it, but it's just so beautiful. It's just, it just captures the environment of that area of Northern Ontario, which is an area I love to photograph. And you mentioned the group of seven, and, I think every Canadian knows the group of seven
and some
Tom
beyond,
Thompson.
even, Rick.
Yeah. So it's there. That influence is there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and let's get into a little bit of nitty gritty. Yes, there's the technical aspects of capturing the imagery and composition and all that, but then you come to the other side of it, and you have to start making decisions about the scale of the prints that you're producing, how they're going to be framed, the pricing of the work. The edition size. Are you printing these images as limited editions? What's been kind of your approach to thinking about getting the work physically out into the world?
Yeah, it's a good questions, and I think this is an area that I'm still struggling with or learning. Is the idea of how big to make these prints, how to price them. The pricing that you see there is when I first applied for the session. But since then, I've kind of had a rethink. Going, okay, maybe I'm underpricing myself here, and I need to start thinking. So I did some calculations on different sizing and getting different people's points of view about sizing and pricing. And I think, it's definitely going to be more. But I think, to your point, Jason, and I think you made this point earlier in a session that I attended, or other people have also made this point to me, is you don't want to undersell yourself, even though you might feel that you're just starting out.
Yes.
You don't want to undersell yourself because you're not making anything on it. You're just,
yeah.
And you don't want to be
especially
a charity,
as we think about the calculation, as you start thinking about the time it took to go out and gather the subject matter and processing, and then the materials and printing, and then the framing and matting and glass and all of those kinds of things, you start adding all of that up, and pretty quickly a $750 price tag starts to wear pretty thin, and a gallery commission, not to mention.
Yeah.
And there is all of that, certainly. But then also, I always like to kind of hop around and look at it from the other side, and that is that I encourage us to kind of think of art buyers in a little different way than we think about other consumers. And for art buyers, the luxury of being able to afford to acquire and collect art is part of the experience that they're having. And it is not, in my experience, occasionally, I shouldn't say it's not ever this way, but occasionally you will have someone who's coming in to really work on that bottom line and get the very best deal that they can. But that is the exception. In most cases, collectors want the feeling of exclusivity, and they enjoy acquiring fine art, and in this case, fine art photography. And the price tag is certainly a part of that experience. Now, without doing some research and looking at other photographers, and especially black and white photography in this format, it'd be hard for me to say, oh, you should double it or triple it. We need to do the research first. But then ultimately, once we've kind of found that price and get it out there and manage to make a first sale, that then starts to change the equation. Now we've proven the market and can start to work on pricing based on the demand that you create. I would agree, though, however, $750 seems like a pretty low price point in the current art market. I wonder, anyone want to jump in and comment on pricing and format? And Rick, I guess I didn't give you a chance to answer your thoughts in terms of how you're printing these in editions.
Yeah, so these are. I'm not limiting the editions. That's something that I might think about. I was thinking more about not having limited editions, but at some point retiring the image, and just kind of going that
anyone who's been here in these sessions will know that I will echo and say that that's, in my experience, that's a great idea. I work with artists who do both, and both have their advantages, but especially with photography, where there's that opportunity to come across an iconic image that just resonates across a broad audience. Why would we want to artificially limit the opportunity to share that image?
Exactly.
Even if you were to print, 1,000 or 2,000 of a particular image, that's just an infinitesimal drop in the bucket in terms of the number of potential art collectors out there. So why not take advantage of those opportunities? Patricia, you've had your hand up for a little bit here. Let me go ahead and pull you in, and anyone else who wants to comment. Should be asking you to unmute there. Oh,
nope,
still muted. There we go.
There you go.
Gotcha.
Okay. Hi. This is afternoon here in Florida, but I wanted to say that my very favorite one of the photographs that I've seen is the windswept pines, because I love texture, and there's so much texture in that one. As a colorist, I really appreciate black and white. It's like a refreshing to your mind and your eye. But I wanted to ask about, is there a difference in the prices from your original print, from the original, and the prints that you make afterwards? Like in the olden days, it used to be 1 of 12 or 1 of 100 and so forth, or 2, and the one that you purchased was more valuable if it was closer to the original. Is that still?
That's a complicated term to use here, right? What is original when we're working, especially in a digital format? We could say first or second, but original is a little challenging.
Well, I know it's changed with digital photography, and I don't know what you call the kind where you develop it yourself.
Yeah, Rick, at this point, it sounds like, though, your pricing strategy would apply to any of the prints that are being created.
That's right. Yeah. The other question that I have, Patricia, I didn't want to interrupt you, but did you have something else, or because I had
That's good. I just wanted to know about that in particular.
Okay. I think, the other thing that I was curious about, and Jason, you might be able, or someone else might be able to help on this front, was, I'm not printing just to print for my own sake. So I'm wondering whether, does it make sense to say these are only going to be in this size, and here is the price for those sizes, or should I negotiate with a client around sizing? If they
Yeah,
come to me
that's
and
a
say, well, I'd
great
like this to
question
be
too.
24 by 36,
Yeah, and so again, to a certain extent, as the captain of your artistic ship, you get to make decisions about how you're going to approach those kinds of issues. But I will say that most of my artists who are working in media that media lends itself to multiple sizes are printing in multiple sizes. And there's something to be said for being able to offer to a collector who says, oh, I love Rick's imagery. I love this particular image, but I need something larger. And to be able to say, well, he offers it in a 24 by 36 or 36 by 48. And, again, the beauty of the ability to kind of print on demand is that you don't have to stock a bunch of inventory to be able to do that. Right. And so I recommend flexibility there. I just don't see a downside to being able to offer a range of imagery. And, we offer on our website for the artists who do that, we let the clients know that these images are available in multiple sizes. Here's the pricing for each of those sizes. And, it then kind of allows the buyer to participate in the format, in the decision of the format. And so I would be careful about closing any doors when it comes to showing your work. If you've got options to be able to offer some flexibility in the imagery, why not keep those doors open and offer those possibilities?
Yeah, for sure. The only thing that I would express concern about is that with a potential client is, I don't want to go too large, because then you start losing the quality of the print.
Yeah, so you can obviously you can select what the available sizes would be, but to be able to offer whatever the technical limitations are, to be able to offer a range of options within those limits could certainly be a big benefit. Rick, we've done it and run ourselves right out of time for the session today, but I sure want to thank you for joining us and sharing your work with us. I think we would all offer encouragement to keep pushing forward, and yes, to get that portfolio out to galleries and offer your work. There's definitely an audience out there, and as you said, it's just a matter of persistence to be able to find those venues and find that audience. Thank you so much for joining us, Rick.
Thank you very much for having me. It was an honor to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. An honor to have you. And thanks everyone for joining us. We'll be back here next Wednesday, same time, same place. We'll look forward to seeing you in the session. Be well, everyone. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.